Hi, good evening, everyone. I am so happy that everybody can be here for another political conversation. Everybody knows Nancy Jean, and we also have a friend here, Sean Briscoe, who is also going to help us with this political conversation. The whole purpose in this is to help everybody understand and know what they're getting into, how to contact your political people, how to get in if you want to help, where to go in, where it would be important, things like that. So what I'm going to do is hand it over to Nancy Jean, and she's kind of going to direct us in whatever she wants us to do and whatever she needs from us. So Nancy, it's all yours, honey. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, as most of you know, I don't read politics because I used to do politics. And one of the things I used to do in politics with Sean and I worked together for over 10 years, and now he's down in Austin. I grew up in a political family in Illinois. My mother was Republican Woman of the Year, and, I was out as a small child being dragged through the things, but I did learn what it takes to put a campaign together. But what most people don't know is, I want to run for office. What do I need to do? Or where do I need to go? Or they think, maybe I want to run for office. So Sean and I came up with a questionnaire, and we would ask anybody who thought they wanted to run for office, they pre-interview with us, and we'd either decide they were ready or they weren't, or often they would say, I don't want to do that. And then a lot of people are like, that sounds like fun. Let's go for it. So we're going to go through those questions for you. And what I'd really like, I think Sean and I both would like to find, is people all over the country who are interested in running for office. And then we'll maybe have another show about how you figure out where you can run. But the first thing I'd say is, if you want to run for office, the best way to pick a position to run for is, what are you passionate about? If you're passionate about schools and education and kids, then a school board would be right. If you really like roads and sewers and electrical wires and things like that, city councils, and safety and patrol, but whatever field you want to start from and come in, you can. And we're talking here about partisan and nonpartisan races. Sean, do you want to define nonpartisan and partisan?
Yeah, partisan race is a race that's held with a primary that's based on parties. So either the independent, Green, Democrat, Republican, whatever party that has filed in that state or standing in that state can run in that primary. And they are generally very low turnout events. It's kind of the 5% of the population votes in a primary, generally speaking. And then you have nonpartisan races, which are just races that are held without a primary. They normally, especially these days, they run into a runoff. So you have a general election, then a runoff. Whereas a primary and then a general election, the primary kind of boils it down to two candidates, and then those two candidates run. And that's why there is rarely a runoff.
I have a question. So, Sean, sure. Who are you?
Oh, so I started working in politics in 1998. I've worked in over 50 campaigns, everything from special election, Board of Education, all the way up to president. I worked with Nancy in 08, 07, 08 in Obama's campaign. We coordinated the knocking of a little over 1 million doors over 4 counties. I've worked in just about every size thing you could possibly imagine. I've run races on territories and states, all sorts of places.
Yeah, Sean lived on Guam for a while.
I did live on Guam. I, in fact, started working in politics in the 26th Guam legislature.
Wow.
There were not many 6-foot Irishmen working in the Guam legislature back then, or now, or ever. And which was really interesting, because that one's a unique event, just simply because you get to see where territorial, federal laws all kind of merge together in a really unique way, and it kind of prepares you for just about anything else you're ever going to run into. So it was an interesting start, no doubt.
So for those like me, when I first came into politics, they were like bipartisan, partisan, bipartisan. Can you please really give an in-depth what is bipartisan and what is partisan? Because every time they throw those words out, my brain just starts to get really confused.
Do you want to take it, Sean? Or you want
Yeah, sure. Bipartisan is when both parties are working together to move something forward. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen on occasion. And so they're talking about the infrastructure deal right now, and they're going to do a test vote in the Senate. If it's not happening now, it's supposed to happen soon. And it's a $1.5 trillion bipartisan piece of legislation. Now, the problem
How many
with
do you have to be bipartisan?
Really, you just need one of the other party. Okay. That's it. Technically, that makes it bipartisan. It was important.
That's why January 6th was bipartisan, because Lynn Cheney and Kinzinger are there. They're Republicans, and the rest of the committee is Democrats.
Yeah, even if you have an independent, like let's say it's a Senate committee and you have Bernie Sanders there, and then you have the Democrats and it's all the rest of it's Democrats, it's still not technically bipartisan, even though the independents are a party unto themselves. But since, there just aren't a lot of them and they tend to caucus with the Democrats, they're kind of thrown in with that group simply because the other side has just gone so right that, you can, it's not. So bipartisan just means that there's at least one other person of the other party helping and making a real, added, are adding to the process and not just there to cause trouble and bang their fists and yell a bunch. They're actually there to be part of the solution.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So that was kind of my curiosity as we were focused on what bipartisan, partisan is, so that we can, when we throw out some acronyms and what those things are, because literally as getting into politics, I go politics, ew. And that was how I approached it back in the day. Mm-hmm. But when Trump got in, I'm in. I'm like, okay, I can't not be in anymore. And so I learned by fire hose, just like probably everybody else has. And sometimes when they throw out these words, I'm just still trying to absorb them. So I was just,
so let's understand, if we go into anything else, what I started to say at the beginning, and it was go with your passion. So if you really are interested in a subject like the Sierra Club or groups like that, if you're part of those groups and you see that politically things are not getting pushed in your direction, it might be time to think about putting your own hat in the ring. The sad truth is, and I'm a child of the 60s, but the sad truth was things needed to be done and there was no one left to do it but us. And so, it's kind of where you get to, like, the only way that's going to get done is I have to make a commitment to do this. And where do you feel you'd have the most effect? Where do you have the training to have the most effect, or things like that? And then would you fit well into a political role? Now, I know all about politics. I know all about running people. I know all about everything. I know everything about keeping my dog quiet. But I know how to do all those things, but I don't have the temperament to sit across the table from a fool and not say you're a fool. So, I really admire people who can do that. And I'm more than willing to help good people get in that position when I was working in politics. Rules for running are, is it partisan? We just discussed that. Is it a party-based or a non-party-based race? How do you file? And that's all online now. Trust me, when I started out, it was so hard. If you had someone who running for the school board, you had to go down to the school board headquarters and get all the paperwork and bring it home. Now everything's online.
What do you mean by file?
Okay. In order to get into a race, you have to put your name on the ballot. You have to declare you want to run in that race. And there are always rules around that so that people aren't running in the day before the election saying, put my name on. And those are the rules for filing. The other thing you learn when you're filing is normally you have to file a treasurer because you're going to have some money coming in, and you have to file that person's name. You have to find a friend or someone they don't have to even be good at math. because you may get somebody who's really good at math who'll do that, but they have to sign off that this money's being reported accurately. So you go down, you get the documents, they tell you how to file. Like if you were running in Dallas County, you can run in a school board, you can run for the county, you can run for the city, you can, and the city and the school board are nonpartisan races. The county and all the other races are partisan. They all have political affiliation. That's the state house and the Texas State Senate and all that stuff. So you have to kind of know, it's just good to go learn the rules of the road. What do I need to do? Who do I need to report to? Where will all these documents be going? And that's really easy. You pick the race you want to run, you Google it, and you see what's there, and you find the stuff. The other way you can learn about a position is to get to know the people who are in that position or who have run for it before. Sometimes retired politicians are the most fun because they'll tell you all that story. Right. And people love to talk about what they were passionate enough to go out and get elected for. So that's another possibility. Sean, do you want to go through the other questions? We're down to, is my family on board?
Oh, yeah, there's the whole thing. There's a misconception. When you're running for office, it's like you're saying, I have a full-time job, and now I would like another full-time job. And if you don't have the backing of your family or close friends, that other full-time job of running for office can really be hard. You got to have buy-in. And you need a community. You need people willing to walk with you on a Saturday when it's 102 degrees and knock on doors. You need people. You need people to tell you you're doing great, keep working, keep going. Because if you're sitting by yourself in a room putting envelopes together, you're doing it wrong. You need buy-in from other people. And a lot of people who run for office are told by people, hey, you should run for office. Make sure you write down all the names of everyone who told you to run for office, and you call them and say, I've filed. I'm now running for office. So when you said I should run for office, yeah, make sure you do that. A lot of people will be like, man, like 35 people told me to run for office, and then where are they? It's like,
and the other part is, significant others. Go home and talk to your wife, your partner, whomever, because quite honestly, your kids, if they're verbal enough to know what's going on, because you're going to lose a lot of time with them. Things are going to change in your world. That also means people you work with, your job. We had a candidate who is really a pretty good candidate, but his job decided to send him to Norway in the middle of the primary. And so I had to stand in for him. And I'm a good speaker and all that, but people want to see the candidate. They don't want his manager there. Right. You need to make sure everybody's on board, because we've actually seen one race totally scuttled because the significant other, who was just, yeah, go for it, honey, would sit and get drunk at every white wine cheese thing we had for them. And it was we had to get them out on a porch and keep them away from people. It wasn't good. It worked out okay once they decided they didn't want to really scuttle their campaign. But if people can say yes with their mouth, but really talk to them, because it's a strong time commitment. And it got to the point where Sean and I would go and we would talk to the significant other away from the candidate, and we said, we're here because you may not want to tell them the truth, but we're going to sound it out. And we didn't discourage anybody totally from running, but we did get some things. No, I'm not really happy about this. And we said,
what we're really doing there is we're solving problems that haven't happened yet.
Right.
Because if we don't go and, so the candidates, especially new candidates, especially candidates that, are very gung-ho, they're very optimistic. And the picture they may paint for their significant other may not necessarily be the most realistic version of what is really about to come down the pipe. And I find that when I haven't explained to the client's significant other what really is going to happen, then 3-4 months when they've got 3 forums that week plus they've got 2 interviews, plus they've got 4 fundraisers in 1 week. And all of a sudden the wife or the husband's looking around going, I'm pretty sure I'm married. I think I've got some jewelry that says I'm married, but where the hell, that happens. And
I still have a certificate.
oh no, I always tell candidates, if they've got 2 kids, they're about to have a 3rd kid. Because it takes up as much time as a newborn baby does, a campaign. And you'll be up at 8, you'll be up all night. You'll have to wake up crazy early. You won't eat right. Any of this sound familiar to any parents out there? It's a real thing, and stress and everything else. So the more of those kind of questions that we focus on the family unit and get them all on board, or at least get them dealing with reality, the better off the whole campaign's going to run.
At least I can't say I didn't know. I didn't know it was going to happen. The next question we go to them about, and this is what Sheila and I were talking before we came on. She's got the Barbie doll that owns a bar running in Bobert.
Bobert.
Yeah. Are your finances sound? Now, apparently she was in a lot of debt and all of a sudden it went away.
Correct. She was apparently the investigation is that, and what we have dug up around here in Colorado is that she was in debt. All of a sudden her debt's all paid off. Her husband has been, like he exposes himself to young children. I mean, and she's been, they are just criminals upon criminals, but yet they got elevated to Congress. She had never run a race. She'd never done anything.
Well, she passed her GED before she got in Congress. Aren't we?
I want proof of that.
Yeah, I'd want it too. But for the normal people who are listening to us now, just look at your finances. Can you really afford to do this? Because it's not cheap. I mean, you're not putting all your own money in it, but just by time you lose and other things and dry cleaning bills and clothing and
gas.
Gas.
I mean, gas. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
the amount of gas. Especially, I mean, I run races in Texas and pick a congressional district. They're so gerrymandered. My last congressional district had 13 counties in it. And you could drive from one end to the other, and it took a little over 3.5 hours just to drive through, not stopping anywhere. So it's just the logistics of running have to be considered. We can get into that later. Finances, I'll tell you. So part of my job is I do autopsies on campaigns. I go in, I see where the money was spent. Not only do I see where the money was spent, I see when the money was spent, which can tell me a whole lot, and how much of that money was spent and on what. All those things are little clues that kind of tell you, well, for example, if you're doing a piece of mail, I already know what universe you're mailing into because I've already done my homework. I've got my data set. So I know how many pieces of paper, and I know the approximate cost of a general piece of mail. But really, that's only a very small part of the cost of doing a piece of mail. The other bit's postage. So your postage is if your piece costs 5 cents or 10 cents to print bulk, your postage is 45 cents. 40 to 45 cents. So I mean, you're talking about just doing that simple math. You're able to figure out exactly how big of a universe they're mailing into, how much was their, how big of a piece did they push if you don't already have a sample. I mean, there's all sorts of little clues in campaign finance reports. But
I was to say, I have a question about that. So we understand that the financial impact, your time is impacted, your sleep, your eat, all of that is impacted. However, what makes it worth it? You know what I mean? Where does the money actually come from? Is this where the campaigning is I need donations? Does it work that way? How do you, it's like, I really want to go. I don't care if I do.
The best way to financially run, and this is why lots of rich people run, or people who have their debt mysteriously vanished run. For example, the mayor of Austin, the way he ran his campaign, years ago, He loaned the campaign $400,000 from himself. He loaned it to the campaign and then raised against it as he moved through his campaign. So then he got paid back for the money he loaned the campaign. Now, why this is super important, why this is really the best way to do it, every dollar you spend at the beginning of your campaign will work for you if you did it correctly for the entire life of the campaign. So the money you spend on your logo or any art or any digital work or your headshot or all that money you spend gets used on a million things between point A and point B, the beginning of the campaign and election day. It just gets used and reused and used again, and it's on your mailers, it's on your yard signs, it's on everything you could possibly imagine. So that money you spent there keeps working for you the whole time, and it's early money. Now, if you're gonna, like, for example, let's build a field program. It takes time to walk a field program. You get about 25 doors an hour, do the math. And so you end up with, so the earlier you can start that, the longer that money that you spent building that field program can work for you. So early money just is worth $10 to one versus late money. It's just worth 10 times more.
You can't play, it's hard to play catch up, but
if you're behind, you're behind.
Right.
That's it. You've got a different campaign to run.
Right.
And that's where you really need somebody financially to help you with all of that as well.
Well, you need to figure out your win number. You need to know how much cash you're going to need. But one of the next question we have on our list is, do you have the stomach to ask for cash? You have to. I mean, they're not going to. I had a candidate once who wanted to run for Congress, and he decided that people would give me money. I wasn't running for Congress. He was. And he had first said he was going to self-finance, and then he decided against that. And eventually, we parted the ways because he got very angry because at the end of a very important meeting, when I handed him the note, asked for the money, he wouldn't. And he said, no, that's your job. And no, it's not. I mean, you as a candidate have to understand you're going to have to raise the money or find another way to have people involved that can cover for the cash you don't have. And also the other thing you have to have the stomach for is, will you go negative? Because if you find out, I had a candidate who was a great guy. He was running against a guy who appeared to be a great guy, and we found out he almost beat his first wife to death. And it was a story that got all covered up because there was money involved. I mean, there was family money. And we one of our supporters, I gave up on it. I said, I can't really track down the truth of that or not. One of my supporters hired a private detective who didn't tell us and found the policeman who dragged the woman out of the house. The policeman was willing to make a statement because he was really upset this guy was running for political office. And he said, I think people ought to know. I know he may say he's better now, but what the hell? And what happened was my candidate wouldn't let us use it. And he lost. And the guy ended up not being a total disaster, I think he did get his life back together. But it's like, is it more important? Had I not been running his campaign, if I found out later as a constituent that he knew that story, and then that guy voted for crappy laws for protecting women because he saw it from the other side, I would resent the hell out of that candidate forever. Because I want to feel they're being somewhat honest with me. So that means understanding your own values. What are your values? What do you value in doing things? We are obviously looking at a party sitting in Washington, D.C. that has absolutely none. And, and not only do they have none, that they'll spew lies and say whatever they want to. But do you know your own values? And that's important.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So if I'm going to go run, I want to go run. I am able to put together some money. Mm-hmm. I'm able to go file at the appropriate time, mm-hmm. whatever, at the place. I am a debater. I would love, that's my favorite thing to do. I would get up there and debate. Mm-hmm. So I would get up there and do all of that. Okay, so now I'm there. And all of a sudden they realize that I throw tarot cards. Mm-hmm. How bad is that?
Okay, there's a question on down, and you've taken us right to it. What if my opponent finds out about? And that's one reason why I could never run for office too, because of my background in that. But I mean, it depends. I think now it's much more acceptable, and as we go in the shift, the 4 and 5D shift, being a psychic will not be considered a hindrance. But I had a candidate once, brilliant. He ended up being on city council, great guy. But we used to always sit down and say, what's the worst thing they're going to find out about you? Because I don't want to get blindsided running your campaign and 4 weeks out find out some story, and have to cover for it. And he said the worst thing that happened was he was arrested when he was in college because he was in the back seat of a car the police had stopped. Now, he's an African American. He was in the back seat of a car the police had stopped. And he refused to give them his ID because he wasn't operating the vehicle, and he knew enough about the law to know he didn't have to. He ended up being arrested. He ended up he eventually got the thing expunged from his background, but it was going to show, the way it would read in a headline was very bad. And so we said to him, okay, now we can work with this. And what we had it ready for when his opponents found out about that. And what he stood up and said, yes, I did this as a young man. And he said, I will explain to you my point of view, but I should have had the wisdom to stand back and say, this is a police officer, cooperate, go along. And now mind, this was in the early 90s, maybe, yeah, early 90s. And he said, but now when I speak to young people, I tell them to be respectful to their adults and try to cooperate and try to get along. And he had the whole story like, I'm not ashamed about this. I learned from it. I moved on. Whereas if we had never had him sit and think about it, he always thought this is this horrible thing. No one can find out I was arrested. Well, he was arrested, and he got it expunged because it wasn't a good arrest. So, yeah. And so you're right. People would find out. Anybody who's got YouTube would know Sheila. Sheila.
Right. Well, I live an extremely boring life. There's nothing else back there. So I was wondering how I would explain away cards. What would you suggest somebody who would want to run? Like, I want to get up there and I do cards. I think, yeah, I do. And I'm proud of that. Or what would you do? What would you suggest for somebody that had something like that so that they can move forward in there and what they want to do?
Just say it's a particular skill you have. Just like when I was in a custody battle, they had me on the stand and they said, you read cards at psychic fairs and your children have been exposed to this. And I said, yeah. And they know that I knit and that I sew and that I'm a really good cook because those are the things that interested me. I got it completely off the, pointed hat, black hat witch thing. And that was in the 80s. And believe me, it was a pointed hat witch thing. But you just be truthful about who you are. I can tell you when I'm watching candidates, I can tell people who are truthful. That's why I like to meet candidates. I like to see them in person, and it's getting harder and harder the more threatened people get. But when Beto announced he wanted to run for, was it Senate the first time, Sean?
Yeah, he was running against Ted Cruz.
Yeah. And he came and he went to a beer yard in a place called Deep Ellum. And he came in and I said, I just want to see what this guy's like, because we've had a lot of people wander through. Boy, he's the real deal. He is the real, truthful, upfront person that you see with the camera. That's who he is. And I've met other politicians. That's not who they are. You just get a feeling that they're telling you the truth to a point and not beyond that. And I would encourage anyone who gets the opportunity to go see candidates to get there. Some people have put in the comments to get involved with your local political party. That's a great way to get in, get to know people in your precincts. Precincts are little bitty political units, and then they grow out. And you can kind of, if you feel comfortable that or like being there, go for it.
So what if you just want to vote and promote voting? What would you do? How would you get involved in that on that side?
On promoting voting?
Like, I don't want to run for office, but I dang sure want to get in and make sure everybody votes.
Right. There's there's several different groups where you can get politically astute and learn a lot. One of them is Indivisible. I really like them. I think they have a great handbook. In Dallas, I helped a couple of the Indivisible groups started. They started right after Trump got elected, and I helped them get organized so that they look like an organization. And the two that I helped are still going because they knew what it took to be a cohesive whole. Look at a candidate. If you want to volunteer, I'd ask the same questions like, how did they get the money to get here? And those sorts of questions. Those are invaluable because then you kind of know maybe who you're supporting. I'd go to things they had where I could see them speak, make sure they can speak, make sure they're not spewing weird crap.
Find out if you have a precinct chair or not. A lot of precincts don't have precinct chairs. And if you don't have a precinct chair, file and run for a precinct chair. They'll just get approved by the party, and then you're a precinct chair. If all you do want to do is really just GOTV, it's get out the vote, that's all a precinct chair's job to do. Such a great place.
I'm a deputy registrar for Dallas County. In Texas, you can, every 2 years, you go take a little thing, and you get a number. And I can register voters. If someone walked up to, if I ran into a neighbor who said they weren't registered to vote, I have the forms. I can help them fill them out. I can get them where they need to go. And they're doing it. League of Women Voters. Yes, League of Women Voters is absolutely.
They have the best candidate write-up form that I've ever seen. And I've filled out probably thousands of them. I will tell you, they're the ones so having run 50 campaigns, I don't even know what fraction of 1% I am now part of as far as like people who've done this. And I go to them when I want to know, especially about judicial level stuff, the real low page 5 of the ballot, that level. That's where I go because they just have the most honest answers. And I mean, they do a really good job of making sure that every candidate, a lot of judges, of course, is a bad example, but they can't really talk about a lot of stuff, but they get a lot of background, and you can see if they, where they come from, and you can get a better feel, even if you've actually never personally met them. They do a really good job. Really good job.
And the other thing you can do is, I know that at the Indivisible group, I gave them maybe we can do it on another show, but I have a form I would have all my volunteers fill out. What have you done in your life that you like to do? Do you like to phone bank? Have you ever walked door to door? Are you really good in admin? Are you excellent in Excel? Can you do data entry? All kinds of things, because there really should be a place for almost everyone in any campaign. But we're talking now about, I want to run. How do I get to run? Other than your passions and your other things, go and find out how your government around you is kind of put together, and then volunteer to be on committees and boards. They cannot find enough good people to be on committees and boards. And often, I know at least it's for sure in Dallas, if something goes before the city council to be voted on and it's a change in zoning or something like that, it's already gone through the planning commission and some other things. By the time it gets to the city council, you're not going to stop it. That train's so far out of the station. You need to understand how those pieces of your government work, because that people like that can really, really mess your life up. I fought a certain large organization that's the largest retailer in the world, and we beat them in an open vote. We were the first one in the world to do it. I ran the group that did that because I wasn't going to have them plump their giant thing right down next to my house. It was a very inappropriate place. I mean, there's appropriate spaces for them. They were not picking the right one. But if you get into understanding those committees and boards, and it used to be, my youngest son, Patrick, I dragged him hither and yon all over City Hall. They used to call him the little citizen. And he's 6'6" now, but when he was little, his feet didn't even touch the floor. He'd be sitting in chairs surrounded by all the police captains in the police department at one time over something, or all of the emergency services for different things. And he knows more about civics and government just because he understands that there's all this other background that goes on. And yeah, I know, guys, it's work. But you know what? A whole lot of people sat in their butts for 30 years and did nothing, and look what we got.
Right.
So we need to
Got
get
complacent.
active.
Sure. So our
and-
lowest level thing we can do is go find our local precinct.
Right.
Volunteer.
Mhm.
That's the lowest level we can do, is to get in and learn, kind of like start at the bottom, where say I only have like 20 hours a week that I can volunteer. That's
Right.
that would be a perfect place for that.
That would be a perfect place for that. The other place would be for if you see a candidate or situation. It doesn't have, you can volunteer with like League of Women Voters. They have volunteers. Sierra Club, different sorts of park groups. You might find in your city, sensible people for parks and stuff. And you can find a group that fits with what you're interested in. I had a guy who lived by me, and he was a landscaping expert, and he ended up landscaping all these huge parks all around Dallas. That's all his work, because he was willing to volunteer and give his time to do that. You can find where your personal skill is a niche. I don't know, where as a psychic, if we can tell them, oh, the road shouldn't go there, I don't think they're going to fall. But the other thing is,
that's not a good idea, my dear.
No, but these are other groups you can get involved with that affect the political structure. PTAs, business groups, major employers in your area, a lot of them will have sort of trade organizations that rely on things. Chambers of commerce, alumni associations. If you're an alumni of some school, there's some alumni associations in Dallas that are very powerful. Unions, professional organizations of all kinds. Also, chambers, art organizations. If you like the arts, join an art organization, and there's going to be a branch that stays in touch with the political situation and how money is pouring towards them, and helps proselytize arts to their community. Political parties, that's precincts. Churches are centers of faith. Some of them are, you'd be careful about which one you pick, but use your sensibilities. Neighborhood centers. If you've got HOAs, I was president of my HOA on and off for almost 20 years. My husband and I kind of rotated. Now I'm going to tell you right now, in working in politics, HOAs are the most brutal hand-to-hand combat politically you can go into, because you're talking about where your neighbor's house is, where their house is. It's like their tree, their bush. I live in a condo association. There are 212 people who are invested there. We had to speak for all of them. So it was a real good chance for me to realize I wasn't going to go into politics that way. Crime Watch and emergency services. Sometimes in Dallas, our fire, not only do we have Crime Watch, but we have people who raise money and funds to take care of the fire department, to make sure that they have all the extra things that the city, you think that they're keeping you captured there for 24 hours a day. They take care of your needs, but they don't. These guys were having to bring paper towels from home and stuff. So each part of the city created a pool of people that would help meet whatever needs they needed in their fire department. Supporters of parks, water rights, which is going to become huge. And there are water rights groups, and those guys are going to become politically very potent very quickly. And any issue-oriented citizen group that you can find that, and because I can tell you all about what's going on in Texas, but that may not work real well in Florida. Or it may not work well in North Carolina. Somebody just put a thing about Airbnbs. That's true in Dallas. There's a whole bunch of neighborhoods that started making the city restrict the number of Airbnbs that could be in their neighborhoods. So those are all issues. And if it's something that's going to affect your life, go for it. Really go for it.
I know that.
I actually saw a couple questions. There was a bullhorn.
That's right.
That'll work. One of the people's like, oh, I'm registering as a Democrat. Not a lot of people know that in Texas, you can't register as a Democrat or Republican or anything. You're just registered Texan to vote. So the way we have to go in and figure out who the good guys and the bad guys are is real complicated, especially when a whole bunch of the Republicans voted in the 2008 primary. for Hillary.
They voted for Hillary against Obama.
And the reason I know that is because I knocked on doors, tens of thousands of doors, personally and with teams. I mean, personally, I know for a fact I knocked on 10,000 doors. And my team knocked on many times that.
Doors.
Yeah. And well, the thing is like I knock on a door. I know this guy voted in the Democratic primary. He opens the door. I'm like, hi, my name is Sean. I'm with the Democratic, blah, blah, blah. We're running blah, blah, blah. Here's a list of all the candidates. We really appreciate your vote. He'd be like, I'll never vote Democrat. You guys are evil. And he slams the door in my face. I'm like, all right. Take good notes.
No, I had a candidate who went up to the door and he said, I'm here running for Democratic State House. And the husband was like, it's a mistake. No one in our house would ever vote for Democrats. But behind the guy, he could see the wife going, leave. She was voting. And he didn't know. Get out of here. So you're, and even just by running for an office, you help the cause because we had there's a county just north of me. If I sneeze in my chair, I can blow myself through the wall and almost be there, called Colin. And it was like red, blood red. And then Obama and Hillary had a primary there because there was no way to know who the Democrats were. But that primary brought everybody out. So before the primary, I told a candidate who's running up there that he had 9,000 voters that we could identify that had voted Democratic. Now, this is a big county, right? After Obama and Hillary ran in that primary, it went up to what, 300,000? It went so much because people finally showed up and voted as Democrats. So then we knew where the Democrats were, but it really screwed up everybody's financing because they thought they only had to find 9,000.
Yeah, there's a lot of elected officials that would very much like to keep the primary voter universe very, very small and easy to control and not very. Remember, I talked about earlier about your printing cost versus postage cost. They don't want to spend the postage, and they don't want to knock on that many doors, especially incumbents. Incumbents really don't like when you expand the primary voting universe because and you can see why. I mean, that's what AOC did in New York. Knocked out what was the 10th most powerful Democratic congressman in Congress. I mean, that doesn't happen by accident. And there are certain elected officials in areas I've worked with Obama who were very upset we were knocking on doors in their neighborhoods because the last thing they wanted was a motivated electorate. They've been in office 20 plus years. They never had a problem, So yeah, it's really complicated. Somebody also asked, Barbara, I believe, Wheel asked in the comments, yes, your vote is secret, but if you participate in a specific primary, that's public record. I don't know who you voted for in that primary, but I know you voted in that primary because anyone who votes in the first Tuesday of March in Texas, I know what primary they voted in. Now, unless you just no, it's all primary. Yeah, I'll know because there's a Democrat primary and a Republican primary.
And the only other thing we can tell you is after you vote, we can tell if you voted or not. There's a record that you showed up and voted. My kids learned that early. If I didn't see that they voted, they were off the family good list for a while. And they've all voted because they know I'd go in and see that they voted. But one of the other things you might want to think about is I know it's your duty as a Canadian. See, they don't have the same rules we have. We're going to go into a little thought exercise for you here, Sheila. Okay, the messages, think about the message that you get. Like if you just take like some little standard blurb and don't go to the Women League voters, don't look them up online, don't find out what their finances are. And I know it's really hard without a lot of local press coverage to know what to do. But okay, we're going to look at 3 candidates. It's a nonpartisan race. All 3 are veterans. All 3 of them are veterans. One of them comes from a very wealthy family that everybody knows. He's got that kind of name. Everybody knows who he is. And you've heard rumors that he might be a bit of a drinker, but maybe that's just somebody else's bad press. You really don't know. And but you definitely know he's a smoker. And he's candidate 1, and he's never really run a successful business or anything on his own in his life. Okay. Then you got candidate number 2. He's also a veteran, served admirably. He also comes from a certain level of wealth, but you hear a rumor that he has an illness that he's keeping hidden from everybody. Nobody knows how bad this illness is, but he's keeping it on the down low while this is going on. And then you hear that from all the people. That's kind of the murmur on the streets. Then candidate 3, he's also a veteran. He was decorated, and he's a vegetarian. He's not married. He believes in sort of family values sort of stuff, not like Republicans, but that you should be able to make a living wage. Wives should be able to stay home if they want to, that kind of stuff. The other things you can kind of fill in, candidate 1, I did his. Candidate 2 has also been kind of known to play around on his wife, which, it is what it is. Okay. Who are you going to vote for? Candidate 1, who's got the rumored drinking problem. Candidate 2, who may be unwell, but nobody's for sure. And candidate 3, the vegan, who kind of has family values. So who do you think you vote for, Sheila?
Well, I would definitely investigate the vegan. However, sometimes vegans are crazy, so I have to consider that. I'm not.
No, be totally honest. That's probably a good thought.
They kind of go overboard and they go over to the control side.
Mm-hmm.
Please, if you're a vegan, I appreciate everything that you do with your body. Don't get me wrong here, but you know what I'm saying. If I'm going to vote for somebody, I may want to know, and then it's like, okay, this guy may be ill, but can he last 6 years? Can he last 4 years? But if he's the better candidate, I might look for the one that is unwell.
Okay. You want to know who those 3 candidates are?
Who?
Winston Churchill's the drinker. Roosevelt had polio and was paralyzed, and they kept it from people somehow or another. And the 3rd candidate was Hitler.
See,
you're right about your vegan. You're the first person we didn't catch with that.
Yeah, not many people catch that one. That was a good one.
But
yeah,
the thing
because
about it is,
because I live in Colorado. If you don't run into a vegan at least once throughout your day, you don't live here. You don't know what you're doing. You're not out.
yeah,
right?
I know. Yeah. But the thing about it is that those little profiles, that's sometimes all people know about who those people are.
Right. Exactly.
And that's what we lived with for a long time. People thought, oh, well, I can look at this quickly and be done. Or the other thing that used to kind of worry me when I was involved with politics, or when I was just involved as a neighborhood leader, people would come to me and they'd say, who should I vote for? And I'm like, I would tell them who I thought the best candidates were and why. But it's always kind of shocked me how lazy people wanted to be about politics. I think we've just had a 4-year very hard lesson on why we can't be that way anymore. And
I used to vote. I used to go, ooh, he's cute. I mean, really. I mean, that's how Clinton got in for me. I'm like, ooh, he's the cutest president I've ever seen. And why did I do that? I don't know. But it was because it was, all the other stuff. I mean, it was like irrelevant, and I didn't make it relevant. And that was my lesson. You know what I mean? My lesson. Yeah. I don't know how many other women.
Somebody in here is talking about what's going on in Arizona.
What's going on in Arizona?
Someone took a picture of her son's death certificate.
What?
They to see if someone had voted in the place of her son. Yeah, that fraud is just horrible, and I really hope there's some way to go after it. But and the other thing you can learn how to do, and then we'll kind of cut this off because it was really to inform you how to run. Volunteer to work in your polling place if you're physically able to do that. I was doing handsprings during the last election because so many young people showed up to work the polls. And I don't know how they work it in your state, but in Texas, they actually pay you to be there. But it used to really be, honest to God, I'd go to poll worker training and they all made me feel like a spring chicken, and I had bad knees and needed them replaced. So, you know, but if you can help that way, that's a wonderful way to kind of see how the system works and to be there to help safeguard other people's right to vote. Because if people who are enlightened do not go in and take those jobs, then the people who are going to show up are the ones that are going to screw up the voting.
Well, here's something that when I was this was 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. My husband and I were living in Baltimore. This is before he passed, of course. He was alive. And I remember being in Baltimore and being amongst the people. And I remember a lot of conversation. When you're a white woman, for some reason, they think it's okay to talk to you about racism or something like that. Have you ever experienced that, Nancy? It was like really
yeah, most of my candidates were minorities.
Like weird. Yes. That they assume because I'm a white woman, I'm going to accept your racial talk. But anyways, I remember kind of over listening to a conversation and watching a documentation of this, that the white supremacy, they went crazy. They went out there. They all got in trouble. And then they all went silent and started organizing their situation. They literally said in this document and the people that I was talking to, that they are going to infiltrate the police departments. They're going to do the fire departments. They're going to do and they're all going to get in where they can be more powerful, and they were going to reorganize that way. And I thought to myself then, I was like, wow, this is going to be scary. And here we are, 12 years later, after hearing what they were going to do. That was exactly how they did it. Exactly how they did it. Well, and that's where we need to organize on ourselves on this side. That's what the whole plan is. This is what this whole video is about. We need to organize on our side, because it's like we need to get in there. We need to start having our voice, and we have, get into the platforms, the public platforms, and talk and speak and be a voice somewhere.
Right, and find a place you can go learn. And if you don't want to, if it doesn't suit you, being a volunteer is great. I used to always tell my volunteers, just show up, and if you don't like the job, come tell me and we'll figure out another place where you can go.
Correct. And I just want to mention that anybody who is vegan or vegetarian in the chat, this was any way whatsoever a plight to you or a diss to you. Just know that we were trying to make an example of things that who was a candidate to vote for. So just remember that.
Yes.
Take a deep breath, everybody.
Now you're getting attacked by the pescatarians too.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming on and having another, another political conversation. And I think these are incredibly important to make sure that everybody is well informed. I always say that even when I'm on Facebook or TikTok and I'm talking about if somebody's like commenting on my stuff, and I go, well, first and foremost, I need you to go get well informed so that you can come back and we'll have an intelligent conversation, a well-informed conversation. And that usually shuts them up right then and there. I was like, I know for a fact that you haven't read that. I know for a fact you haven't watched that. So you come back when you can be well informed. We'll have an education, conversation or whatever. So,
can I answer one other person in the chat? Arlene? Of course. My parents were born in Windsor, Ontario. They helped by leaving Canada. No, I think that Canadians can do the good job of taking care of their side of the border. You've got some whack jobs up there too, and. Just wherever you are, whether you think they're wacky or not, go look for people who are balanced. It would be nice to have adults in the room again, because that's what we really need.
So here's one in here. It says, I've been a supporter, Sheila, and somehow that is not showing up for me. Explain what that means.
Is she a subscriber? YouTube's playing games with our subscriber lists.
Oh, she's talking about being a subscriber on my thing. It's not showing up for me. Are you talking about like when this is
Notices.
the video? Okay.
Mhm.
So make sure when you go onto my page, make sure that you hit that bell. I've noticed even in most of my things that I subscribe to, I go back and check, and all of a sudden the bell is not off, is off for some reason. I don't know what that means. I don't know if
I watch them because I have Nancy Jean's Garden, and then I have my own YouTube thing that I watch that's just under my name, and I watch Nancy Jean's Garden over there to make sure things are coming through right. And today it didn't show my notice, and I went in and it had screwed me up too.
Yeah,
And
so always make sure.
Yeah, you just have to, if somebody's really important to you, you just have to kind of sit on it. Trust me, from our end, if we could do things for you to YouTube, we would, but it's sort of like talking to a hollow bureaucracy. I mean,
oh, I see. You're a member. Go check your membership on that and see how that is. I haven't done anything on my side for your membership not to show up on there. So go check that out, hon. I'm so sorry. She's a membership. Okay.
The other thing I want to remind people, I don't do politics anymore. Do not wander over into the garden and try to talk politics. But Sheila will put, I think, Sean's contact email, because he still does consulting. And if it's just to walk you through the basic steps so that you can talk about your personal situation, he's really good at that. He's really good at finding things called win numbers, which is how many voters you're going to have to reach. He really knows how to do that. I would hope that, if you are interested, it's just kind of a good exercise to go through and see if you want to go.
Also, I've heard a lot of candidates using these platforms to save money. Do a video, get on YouTube, make a Facebook, make all the free things that you can get out to the public. Utilize them, which will also in turn be able for them to then donate to your political whatever you're going for as well, so that you can continue on with your campaign. So there is having money, but we could do it on the cheap. You know what I mean? It's not always, something, because I know somebody who their whole thing was, I'm going to spend all of maybe, $100 to $200 on my campaign, see what happens. And they got elected because they're like, if it works, it works. But they used every free aspect of their campaign, videos, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all free. And it worked. So there's you don't have to be a millionaire to run for office, and I want to put that out there as well.
No, you don't.
But you don't have to be.
You don't have to. You just need to know the rules of the road so that you get filed, you get on the ballot, and you know where you're going, and you have ideas of where you're going. And that's kind of it. Somebody asked if the garden knows if they voted. I don't think my Oracle garden really cares. I mean, I care personally, but the garden.
The other thing I'd like to say real quick is that it is not always all about the money. And understand when you're walking into a new campaign or an election cycle, every election cycle is different from the one before it. You can get sometimes you'll get some resonance, but really understand the environment you're walking into. I watched a race that's had primaries for decades, and I think the most ever spent in the primary, if you added every penny for that primary, was like $30,000.
Right.
And last cycle, it broke 750,000. So understand that when you walk into a cycle, what kind of cycle are you walking into? Who's walking in there? Who are your opponents? Where is their money coming from? Because what I've noticed a lot, and this is what I'm going to leave on. What I've noticed, because I do autopsies on campaigns and I look at where the actual money does come from, the PACs are hiding a lot of money now. They can but there's a lot of giveaways if you know how to look at it. And with the FEC filing, especially with federal races, There's not a lot of stuff they can really hide all that well, and you can kind of reverse engineer it and find out if that same money is going to commissioner races or state house or state senate or stuff like that. And I noticed a lot of Republican money flowing into Democratic primaries, a lot. And you'll find it most often in purple districts where the
'cause
Republicans are just
influence. They want influence. Trust me, I in working on partisan races, I had very, very conservative business groups that gave money to my candidate, and they gave money to the other candidate because they want to make sure that their stamps on that candidate. That's the money game. But what if you have a good idea and you're a good person and you're trying to get your message out, sometimes you're just a message candidate and you can make your neighbors feel differently. But the woman that your Barbie doll congressperson, she's a prime example of how everybody now in your area needs to look and say, how are we going to handle this? And the other good news I can give everybody tonight is that there was just a special election. Was it last night, Sean?
Yep, last night.
District 7, and the Donald Trump endorsed guy lost.
I know. I was like, what? I was like,
you understand, the Democrats cheer in Texas when we get a borderline rational Republican elected. I mean,
so but the Trump guy lost, but a Republican still got in.
Well, nobody ran against them. I mean,
yeah,
that's the biggest problem is nobody's stepping up and running against them.
Right, that's part of it. But there's a reason in that particular. Well,
in that district,
we could get into Texas districting. It's not even funny. Anyway, if people would like to hear more about how all this works, and if you want to do more, we can do on how to volunteer for a campaign. How go more into depths and groups that can help introduce you to the political realm, and where you can go and learn things. Because I came out of grassroots. I'm a big, huge believer in grassroots, and I think it's what's going to save us. But and like I said, Sean can help you focus yourself personally on what would be best for you to go into. And other than that, we'll let Sheila go to bed, because do you have to work tomorrow?
I do have to work tomorrow, but I don't have to go to work until tomorrow at 4. So I have.
Oh, okay.
Now I was just handling a troll.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Yep.
Troll bait.
Trolls don't visit my garden, or they're underground and they're going to cause an earthquake, but they never come visit the garden. I'm not asking you to, please.
They come visit me. I must be the outspoken one.
You are. Well, someday I'll invite you over to the garden and you can see what it's like to be trollless. The only troll I ever had in my garden was my grandson, and I won't say his name, but I was talking to his father on the phone, and I looked over and I saw he was trolling my.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that.
And I actually took pictures of it, and he goes, "I'm your troll, TROL." And then he said, my handle is, and he said his sister's name, her name, Bro. So I said to their dad, I said, do you know where he is? And he said, oh, he's in doing schoolwork. I said, I don't think so. He just said he invaded his mother's computer so he could come be a troll, because he heard his dad and I talk about the fact I had no trolls. And he said, you can't be on YouTube if you don't have a troll.
Somebody said use salt on trolls.
Yes.
Now, after you get them off of the rotisserie, just a little salt, they really taste good.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you all for coming and listening to us tonight. I hope we weren't terribly boring. We'd like to help you.
Yes. You can always, and if I get a hold of Nancy Jean as well, to get a hold of Sean. If I forget to put the thing down there, I'll do my best to remember to put his thing. So this is the person that you can get a hold of to help you through all the process and ask questions. That's one of the most important, to have a point of contact to help you through any of these processes. So, and that's for any state, to be honest with you, and especially if you're in Texas. If you're in Texas, to get a good candidate and a lot of Democratic candidates to start stepping up, I'm pretty sure that the Republicans will be out of office, the more we put some really good candidates up, because I think Texas is done. I really feel that. I felt that the last time that Texas was supposed to go blue, and I thought that would be a miracle in somehow, some way. So I just
For
it
entertainment purposes only, it did.
yes. I
You know?
correct. Just like I don't know
Yeah.
how Boulder got in either in a blue state.
A demographic in math tells me 2028 is our real
Yeah.
tipping point,
Good.
just based on demographics. That's kind of where, and that's kind of been that way. I mean, I came up with that number, and I recheck it every couple of years, and I came up with that number in 06. When I was looking at the math, it seems like Texas would be purple by 2028 solidly. Now, you understand gerrymandering and stuff is affecting that, but that's for another. We have another whole show about that.
Whole nother show to talk about.
We talk about why my legislature is half of it's in DC for some reason.
Well, good. I'm glad that they are taking their vacay in DC and
They're all in the Smithsonian. I've seen it's hilarious.
Actually,
It's awesome.
there's one House member in there that came up to my table at the wine bar the night I was reading, and she said, "Oh, I would love to have my cards read." And she looked just like every other person in the place. So she sat down, and I saw she was going to have a huge change in her life in the spring. And I looked at her, and I just knew it was politics. I said, "Are you running for office?" And she said, "Oh, did you overhear people?" And I said, "No. Are you running for office?" And she said, "Yeah, I am." And I explained to her what I saw on the cards. And I said, "And I just heard you're running for office. If she won her primary, she'd win her election in November. So March was her day." And I said, "Well, do you know what you need to do to win?" And she said, "No." And I sat there on a napkin, and we wrote out these questions and how to build your grassroots. And she came up to my table a year later, and she said, "I had to fight people to do the grassroots stuff you said." And she said, "I only won by 600 votes. And she said, it's because we've done all that grassroots stuff." She's cooling her heels in Washington right now.
Woo! Yay!
And if
All
I
right,
get
everyone.
her, I'll tell her name. But she's a sweetie, and she stops by when I used to read there till I got closed out because of COVID. So anyway, we're gonna let all these people go home and go to bed.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. It's been great.
And if
Yes,
you want, you can get a hold of me at crystaldirections.com. That's my website, and you'll find an email there. And if you say, "How can we find Sean?" I can find Sean.
Yep. Sean, what is your email? Just go ahead and tell them.
It's clsbriscoe@gmail.com. Just email me.
Clsbriscoe, so that your last name, gmail.com. So that's pretty simple. CLS.
Yep.
All right, everyone. You guys have a good night. Thank you for showing up. And I hope this helped, and I hope this was interesting. And so I got a lot of
years, we're going to have a big party and see how many people started running from this.
I know. This is exciting. So, I mean, these are the things that we need for sure. So I know that we got a lot of good feedback from the last one that we did. So if you haven't seen the first one, go see the first one. This is like the second of the installments, I guess. So, all righty, guys. Everybody, thank you. You guys have a good Wednesday evening, and smile. You're on Canada Camera.